Hello and welcome back to What's Up, Doc. My name is Dr. Joanna Neilson and I am substituting this evening for Dr. Martin Sellers. I am the Assistant Dean of the School of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. And with me I have one of our new English faculty, Dr. Abigail Heiniger. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, how are you?
It's that point in the semester, you know. We have a month left, that kind of thing. So we're here to talk about this idea of what can you do with English and how can you explore it, not only here but in other places. So Dr. Heiniger here is the chair of the Department of Language and Literature, so she is a really good person to talk about this. So my first question for you then is, what surprising things can you do with an English major? What interesting things can you do with an English major?
One of the most interesting things that one of our LMU graduates has been doing recently that surprised me was he's now working for the Knoxville PD. And he's responsible for all the communications and the PR and the things that are coming out of the police department there, which is not something I typically think of with an English degree.
Absolutely. And what else could you do with the skills you develop in an English major? The writing, the reading, the analysis?
The skills you develop in English are going to be put to anything where you're using critical thinking, a place where you are thinking about how are you communicating clearly with somebody? How are you conveying your thoughts in writing, not just in, say, essays or books, but what about blogs or on social media? I have students who've gotten their jobs doing social media for companies, especially if they had things like a double major. So an interest in music, now they are the blogger for a music group trying to get attendance up. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a way to help enhance one's ability to communicate as well.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So with transitioning from that to more of you, what are you working on right now?
I'm working on fairy tales. I love fairy tales. And so I get paid to spend my days reading the books that we read as kids and thinking about how is this shaping the people that we are today. I mean, have you ever seen that wedding and you're like, she's watched one too many Disney princess?
Yes.
That's what I study. And so right now I'm looking at minority fairy tales from the 19th century that people didn't think existed because they were woven into novels and poems and sometimes even newspaper articles. So in Ireland, when they're deciding they're going to break away from England and they're trying to get up that willingness to fight and have a revolution against one of the superpowers of the world, they use Cinderella to help get there. Yeah.
So how do you do that? Is Ireland Cinderella?
Yes. Ireland is Cinderella. And they said, we're never going to get to dance with the prince, and the fairy godmother got lost. So we got to break ourselves out of this fairy tale and start a new narrative for Ireland.
Interesting, and it sounds like these are stories that aren't being collected into the official collections, that they're not qualified as a fairy tale.
Absolutely, it's something you never read to your little kids about how Ireland wants to turn over the British rule there. These are for adults.
Absolutely. Do you see them transitioning it all to the screen?
I think that would be fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
I think that would be, in some ways, the cure or the balance to the Disney princess.
Gotcha.
Is looking at these other princesses that emerged or failed and says, this can happen with this narrative too.
That's true. It's not something we think about often with fairy tales, is it?
No.
Usually because it's something that beneficial happens for the character who deserves it. Because the ones that don't survive or don't succeed sound like the ones that are not worthy somehow.
That's exactly the quandary of the fairy tale, that somehow this is your fault.
Ooh.
If you didn't get the fairy godmother come to you, as opposed to, wait, the fairy godmother doesn't exist.
Oh, yeah, I can see where that would be a problem, absolutely. So what are you doing with these fairy tale studies here?
I got to put them into two different books. So one book is, here's my thoughts on fairy tales, the scholarly book of all my thoughts, but I think the one that's more important is just me collecting all these fairy tales that were written in the 1800s that no one thought existed and putting them together, these people who are marginalized by maybe religion or ethnicity or race, and putting that together so that we can have new voices in fairy tales and other scholars can look at them, because they're held in one library in Jamaica or Northern Wales. And so I hunt them down, I find them, I scan them.
Oh, yeah.
And then I get to share them with the world.
Absolutely. Do you have any kind of timeline, a couple of years on what you want to do?
Yes, a couple of years. Well, we're hoping with all the libraries open up, a couple of years. Right now,
Yeah.
we've been a little stymied by libraries, but they're all doing their best too.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially online. Most of the libraries around here have access to online books, so you can check out ebooks or audiobooks without having to go to the library itself and listen to who knows who reading what. So.
Yes, absolutely. And these are the texts that haven't gotten scanned yet.
Oh, that's true. Absolutely.
They're in some dusty archive.
Mm-hmm. And probably haven't been checked out for 60 years.
At least.
Yeah, that kind of, I understand that. I'm a historian, I kind of understand that. So, with the idea of these libraries from across the world, it kind of takes me to my next question, which is, how do other countries and other university systems look at literature, and how do they teach it to their students?
Oh, I love it when my students come from different systems and teach me about literature in new ways, because that's one of the beautiful things about literature. It wasn't made for academia.
Yeah.
It's made for us.
Yeah.
And so when my students bring their perspectives, I had students from the Middle East coming and talking to me about how they read Jane Eyre. And they read it in relationship to the politics that they were facing as women in the Middle East.
Yeah.
I had a Korean colleague who was talking to me about Jane Eyre too. And she said, well, Jane Eyre is something I received from my mother as a rite of passage. And that this book to me was this relationship with my mother. And that is what this meant, which is something very different than it's come to mean, say, in American cinema, where it's a love story. For her and for her community, that as she's talking about it, it's about a woman's independence. It's about becoming an independent person in the midst of, say, a patriarchal culture, which is what Jane is facing. And just this, oh, that's a great reading that we've really lost, but that was really present for that 19th century writer, was eye-opening for me. And one of those beautiful experiences where you like kind of get goosebumps, you're like, oh, wow.
Absolutely. And how can you ask your students in a general class about how they understood a certain text and how it was understood in the time that it was produced and how that's changed over time?
Yes. So I try to bring them, hey, here's the historical background. But then for them to bring, I like to start out with, what did you get first? What was your knee-jerk reaction to this? And one of my favorite ones is, how would you film this?
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
If you're going to film this, what's the message, the point that you're going to bring across? And so you get your reaction first, and then, hey, here's the historical context. Let's see where that fits in. What's changed? What's the same?
That can be a really important tool for teaching literature across time and space. So with that in mind, then, how do you teach literature to students whose native language isn't English?
I have utmost respect for anyone who's coming into English as a second language to learn it, because I struggled so hard in all of my language classes. So when students are coming in and they're coming from a second language, one of the first things I like to have is you can get electronic support. You can get resources that say, hey, you've got this down, but you're missing this, so I'm going to gear this just towards you. And then I think the biggest thing you do with any learner is one-on-one.
Okay.
Have conferences in your office, or now we have conferences over Zoom.
Yep.
Let's talk about this. Let's get down to, because when that conversation, the back and forth starts flowing, then anything that's been blocking the writing can kind of come to.
And when you're reading the paper later, you can say, hey, I remember that conversation.
That's the funnest part.
Yeah.
Or to put in this comment, I remember when you said this. I'm glad you included it here.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that in mind, what fun classes are the English faculty going to be offering, let's say in the spring or even next fall?
Some of the fun classes that you can get in English here and that you can get in English anywhere are things like fairy tales and the fantastic. What about comic books, graphic novels? Have you ever thought about how pictures and words go together? What about ethnic literature, literature that's devoted to specific regions or specific authors, and the ideas and ideologies that are coming out of that? I'm doing one on fairy tales and the fantastic.
That's right. I remember you mentioning that, and I kind of asked if I could take it, and you
I
said,
really hope that you come in with your cape.
with my cape, yeah,
Because
absolutely.
If not, I've got two that we
Gotcha.
can share.
Absolutely. What other kind of classes would you like to offer down the road?
Down the road, things that I would like to offer are not only the fun classes, but also things like technical writing. You can make twice what I'm making with a 4-year degree if you've got technical writing.
That's good to know. Absolutely.
Isn't it? The use of English in things that go from, oh, you could be an advisor to Disney by taking these fairy tale classes. I know someone who advises Disney for money.
Okay.
Or you could be working on cancer drugs as someone who is interpreting what's going on and writing it down to either share with other researchers or share with the world in general.
Absolutely, because it's one thing to have the scientific achievements, which are fantastic, but someone's got to explain them. Someone has to share it with the rest of the world. Science communication is becoming a larger field from what I understand.
Yes.
So absolutely technical writing. Well, thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for tuning in, and be here next time for the next installment of What's Up, Doc.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.